Good morning. My name is Jennifer Ryan, and on behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is part 2 in our 2-part series titled Understanding Unconscious Bias. Will last approximately 1 hour and is a live interactive webinar being broadcasted today, July 28th, 2022. Before we get started, I would like to thank our 2022 corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to affect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, support, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Please be sure to head to the AWWC website for all upcoming events. We are excited to be hosting webinars, collaboration sessions, as well as in-person events throughout 2022. Be sure to check back on our website for registration details. If you could not make one of our live, virtual, or in-person events, don't worry. Webinars and our main board-led events will be recorded and on demand for our followers. Our theme this year is Acknowledge, Adjust, Advance. Each quarter, our webinars and events will be centered around each mini theme. This quarter, we focus our topic around evolving the norm. Be sure to join in these discussions as we facilitate both virtual and in-person events. Have you joined our book club yet? This year, we launched our 2022 book club with 6 books to choose from previous keynote speakers the Alliance had at our events in 2021. If you love reading books, be sure to head to the AWWC website to sign up to join the club. Change is preceded by trust. It is through acceptance and inclusion that trust will be formed and positive impact will occur. The Alliance is committed to creating a safe space in the workers' compensation industry for women of diverse backgrounds and experiences through a shared culture that integrates various perspectives. This is who we are and who we will be. The time to do better and be better is now. The Alliance understands that diversity is a journey and will take time to make meaningful changes for our organization, its followers, and supporters. We will be intentional in making progress along our key pillars of change. Today we join Ericka DeBruce, Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Unum, as we have an open conversation around unconscious bias in our last part of our 2-part series. Ericka founded EDB Consulting in January 2016 because of her love for designing inclusive cultures where everyone, regardless of their difference, is valued and engaged. Ericka has held leadership positions where she was responsible for diversity, inclusion, employee engagement, and corporate citizenship at organizations such as Sedgwick, International Paper, BAE Systems, American Red Cross, Blood Services, American Cancer Society, and Talbots Incorporated. Currently, she is the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Unum, headquartered in Chattanooga, Tennessee. As this is a live, interactive webinar, please feel free to ask questions and comment throughout the Zoom chat feature seen on your screen. We will try to answer your questions as time permits. We love seeing our followers engage throughout our session. Thank you for the time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Give me just one moment while I share my screen. Okay. All righty. Hello, everyone. So excited to be with all of you today. I want to just ask for a little grace. I'm at the airport. My mom fell yesterday, and I'm trying to get to her. She is okay. She's just a little bruised and probably just more embarrassed of all of the hubbub that we have created around her. But nonetheless, I am at the airport, so you might hear an announcement. I can't control that. But there's no way that I would miss this conversation with all of you today. I'm beyond excited to be with all of you. So I just wanted to ground us a little bit from our conversation last time we were together. And I want to make sure that I'm just getting here. There we go. Ground us from our conversation that we had last time we were together. Last time we talked about how our personal or social identity, so the membership of our group, who we belong to, people who we connect with, that we feel normal, that we are familiar, where we can be our authentic selves, the people who get our jokes, who understands our lingo and our vernacular. These are the individuals that are part of our group, and that makes us makes us who we are. And so when we think about the characteristics and the experiences of our social group, one of the groups is us being women. One of the groups is us being in the workers' compensation industry. We get experiences, perspectives, values, and commonality from the groups that we belong to. We also are groups in if you are a parent, if you're not a parent, if you're a bonus parent or not, if you, those of you who are grandparents or just fur babies, have fur babies, all of those are groups. And so when you think about our background, which is our upbringing, how we were raised, who we were raised by and where, we get our social identity, and then we also have our personal identity. A personal identity is all of the characteristics and experiences that are unique to us, that are not a part of our membership of our group. So I want you to think of like Me Too movement being social identity, Black Lives Matter movement, social identity. These things might not have happened to us, like me as an individual, but it's happened to people in my group. And so I am impacted by it. My personal identity is all those things that are unique to me. And so when you think about this combination of my back, which is my upbringing, that gives me my social identity, which is the identity I'm part of a group, the personal identity that is unique to me. This makes what we call socialization. This is the programming, some people also know it as cultural programming, gives us our worldview, our frame of reference, our perspective in which we use to make evaluations, judgments, decisions, how we decide on who we're going to connect with and who we're not, who we're going to help propel forward and who we are not. The biggest part when we think about socialization that comes out of one of the socialization coming out of from an impact of people is this idea around us versus them. Look at this definition of socialization, what we talked about last time we were together. And I just want to pull up the fact that it brings us from a human being, an individual, to a social being. And this idea of giving us our worldview. It's so part of us that we don't even realize that we are in it. There's a saying that I love, that a fish doesn't know he's in water until he's out of it. That's very much like our socialization. We don't realize that we are being socialized until we walk up and talk to or in a different environment and we're like, holy crap, this is completely different than what I know. All right, we were at formation. So I want you, and the reason why I asked Jennifer to put in the groups that you belong to, because a lot of times we totally forget that we are a part of a group. It's one of the most difficult things that we have to do as women, is that we have a tendency to want to kind of blend in and not really focus on the things that we do. And so the groups that we belong to is one of the things that make us unique. It's one of the things that connect us. And so when we talked about groups last time, now we get to lean in to where do we go from here? This idea that our in-groups and our out-groups are impacted by our society, by the world in which we live. There are dominant groups and there are subordinate groups. Dominant in-groups are basically the groups that our society, our world, without our control, so I want to make sure we know that this is out of our control, has said that, hey, men dominant in the work environment. One of the reasons why we have this fantastic organization. But look at the groups that are in the dominant versus the subordinate. I want us to lean in to how this shows up for us as women. And we're going to pull up here the dominant groups from a perspective of women. White women, women in VPs, SVPs, and EVP positions are considered dominant. Women of color and women in director positions are considered supported, meaning that I need some additional assistance, that I might not have the same access to resources and information, that I might not have someone who looks like me in in a different group, so I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. And groups like this is incredibly important to mitigate that. I want to say, and I think I shared this last time I was together, is that this is incredibly difficult. I am multiracial. I know that you can't tell that, but my mom is white and Cherokee, and so she has red hair and freckles. And if she was not hurt from her fall, she would be outside, I guarantee, trying to get darker by the sun. It is challenging for me to say that my mom went from visibly being a white woman is in a dominant group versus me, who's always has been viewed as a woman of color. It makes me squirmy, it makes me uncomfortable, and it's difficult for me to talk about. But once I acknowledge it, and once I realize that, okay, there are far less women of color in the VP, SVP, and EVP positions in not only in corporate America, but specifically in our industry. And that means that we have a responsibility to each other to help each other pull up. And that's the reason why I'm so drawn to the diversity and inclusion mission of this organization, because diverse representation is incredibly important. We also have to lean into the fact that the groups that are in the dominant group are also have some type of privilege. Oh my gosh, I said it. I know, privilege. It's an icky, sticky word because we think that privilege has to do something around I had it easy. And I don't want you to think that privilege has to do with having it easy. Privilege is this idea that society has said that this group has some advantages and this group doesn't. And I want you to think about historically, I want you to go back 400, 500 years. I want you to think about the idea that there were nothing but men that signed the Declaration of Independence. There was nothing but men who made most of the laws of our country today. That privilege was baked in to the fabric of our country because there was men who were making the decision. If you are not 400 years old right now, if you're not 399 years old, about to turn 400 years old, I am not talking about your decisions in your past. I am talking about the systems, the society, the world, and what happened in the past that got us here today. There are certain privileges that those individuals have. And let me just put it in a different way. If I was CEO of a large, big 500, Fortune 500 company, I had the opportunity, because of my level and my position, that I flew private. I got on a jet every time I needed to go to a meeting. When I got off of my private jet, there is a black town car waiting for me. I don't have to worry about being in the airport like I am right now, trying to find a quiet place to have a call. But I am sitting in a very nice private establishment, got in my car, got through traffic. They let me out at the door. When I'm finished with my meeting, I get back in my car, go back to my jet, and go to the next meeting. Would I make a decision to say, you know what? I want to fly on a public airline. I want to stand in line and wait for an Uber. And I would like to, when I get there, not only get out of my vehicle and then go maybe walk 3 blocks to the location. I wouldn't make that decision. Privilege is something that happens to us that is so baked into the fabric that our folks, we realize, oh my gosh, I forget that I have the privilege. Another way of thinking of privilege is the luxury of being oblivious. Privilege being this idea that for me, an able-bodied individual, do not have to worry about when I enter into an office, is there a way for me to get in safely? Is there only a revolving door? Is there an elevator or is there an escalator? When I get in, is the door pull in or out? Will there be the hallways wide enough for me to navigate my wheelchair effectively? There'll be a place for me to sit where there's not a chair already there, but a place that I can roll up to the table and be an equal contributor. Privilege is, for me, is able-bodied because I have the luxury of not having to worry about that. We gotta understand that privilege is a society creation and that it is always in relation to others and someone else's expense. So that means that you can't look at your privilege just yourself, meaning that, like my dad used to say, I went to school and walked uphill both ways in the dead of winter, even though he grew up in Florida. This idea is that I can't look at my privilege by myself, just me. I gotta look at it in relation to others. There's nothing to do with intent or you as an individual because we don't want to own that responsibility, but we all have it. And again, it doesn't determine the outcome, but it definitely makes it a little bit, just a smidget easier, just like my privilege of being able-bodied and have the luxury of being oblivious. It doesn't determine my outcome at the meeting, but it does make me getting to the meeting a little bit easier. And here's what's scary about privilege. Privilege is scary because it's typically invisible. And if it's invisible, then it can't be examined. And if it's not examined, then we don't understand its impact. If we don't understand its impact, then we can't fix it. When we talk about this idea about being privileged, we can be privileged without feeling privileged. And so if I'm going to ask you to explore your privilege, that means that I got to do it too. So what I have done is write down my privileges. So yes, I'm a woman of color, and that puts me in some subordinate groups, but I'm heterosexual, meaning that I can hold my husband's hand. I can kiss him in public and people are not judging me, and I don't have to worry about hate speech. Well, you might judge me for the PDA, but I digress. I'm able-bodied and I am a woman, and the association that I'm automatically the primary caregiver. My husband recently needed to leave work early to pick up my. I was traveling that day and he went to his boss and said, hey, I need to leave early. I need to pick up my son. My son's not doing well. His boss looked at him with a very straight face and with all seriousness and said, your wife can't get him? He said, wait a minute. My wife is out of town and hold on, why do I have to explain this to you? This idea that I, as a woman, can say I need to pick up my child and I never get questioned. If I leave at 3:30, 4 o'clock, people make the assumption that I'm going to school to pick up my child. I'm educated and I'm a senior leader. These are my privileges. And even though I don't feel privileged on most days, I have to accept that I do have them. When we think about this idea around privileges and power, there's a great example around an airplane. This airplane idea is that, if we go from California to New York, it is faster going from California to New York than New York to California. Just because on one way, there are tailwinds pushing the plane forward and allowing the plane to go faster. And the other way, going from New York to California, there are headwinds. What's interesting about this concept is that's how you want to think about privilege. There are some things with our country, our system, our policies, our organizations, and who we are that gives us some tailwinds to propel us forward. But we also have to be honest that there are some groups who have some disadvantages and some challenges. Remember, we talked about unconscious biases last time we were together. These unconscious biases could propel us forward or can push us back. We have the tendency to remember all of the obstacles that are in our journey to prevent us from moving forward. But it's a little more challenging to remember all of the advantages we had to get us to that point. We have to understand that, say, power in this perspective, because I know you all are seeing that word at the top. Power is the ability to control the outcome. We're going to talk a little bit about unconscious biases and how it shows up. I have a video that I would like to play for you. Jennifer and I have tested it a couple of times. I'm confident that it will play, but I'm going to ask Jennifer to send me a text to make sure that it's playing well. We're going to watch this video, and what I want you to acknowledge first is to pay attention to the unconscious biases that exist in the video, but then also to acknowledge the headwinds or the tailwinds that might be shown here in this video. And then we'll talk about it on the other side. All right, here we go.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
It's an ugly, nasty word, and you are going to hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not going to let that word hurt you.
You got your ID? Okay, so stop you. Now, when you get pulled over,
I'm a good driver. Okay?
baby,
Don't worry.
this is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home.
I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
You are not pretty for a black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
We all have privileges. The reason why I wanted to show that video is, one, it does show some of the unconscious biases that exist. But did you notice that those were all moms? Those were all women who have to do the talk, which is something that has been part of the conversation for the Black community for centuries. But what is also interesting, though, is that this is starting to become one of the topics that people are exploring, of going, hey, do I have to have that talk with my loved one? Do I have to have that talk with my child, grandchild, niece, or nephew? We have to understand that as we think about the unconscious biases that exist in our world, that it is impacting the women in our work environment. We all have the opportunity to lift each other up and be able to support one another. But the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we are able to bridge the divide. We are going to talk about, as we wrap up, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity for dialogue and questions today, is that, one, when we talk about bridging the divide, is first and foremost is choosing responsibility. The second is to engage across difference, and this is where storytelling really comes in. I want you to think about how you can leverage your personal power and be an advocate. We're going to start with choosing responsibility. I want to just acknowledge first and foremost that there's a difference between guilt and responsibility. A lot of times we don't explore these concepts around privilege and biases and unconscious biases that exist in our world that is impacting our women in the work environment, because we have guilt. It makes us uncomfortable. See, guilt focuses on a mistake or an error, even though that mistake and error was something that was way in the past. Responsibility centers on action. See, guilt is rooted in the past, and responsibility focuses on the future. Guilt is reactive, where we need to be proactive. Guilt is all about blame, and we want to own, empower, not deflate. I am asking all of you to choose responsibility. Say, I have some privileges that someone might not. And please know that I'm doing that as well. I have privileges that others may not. And what can I do to leverage those privileges and utilize that power to bring someone else up? When we talk about engage across difference, that means that I want you to think about your opposite. I want you to think about the person who has nothing in common with you. And my homework for you is to engage with that person. I want you to think about that. Not someone that has one thing in common with you, but 5 things not. I want you to find someone that has nothing in common with you that you can think of, like when you think about that individual. To engage across difference, to engage with that person, nothing in common with you. That means that we have to suspend our judgments. Remember, when we were together last, we talked about how unconscious biases are rooted in our background and how our background impacts our perceptions. One of the perceptions we have is when we look at someone, we make up a story about them. We think we have them pegged. We think we know who they are. What we have to do is to suspend those judgments, because judgments are only assumptions, and that our actions are based off of our background. We also have to understand that requires us to skip our first reaction. First impressions are not our best impressions. First impressions are based off of all of the stereotypes, generalizations, and narratives that exist in our heads based off of our background and the media and social media. And so when we meet someone, we are not really meeting them, because think about it. When we do our first impression, a handshake, hello, have very light conversation, we don't know anything about that individual. Our background makes us go, what file to put them in? Do I like them? Do I find them warm? Do I think they're competent? Am I connected to them? Do I like them at all? But that is based off of our background determining if that first impression will think of an individual. It requires and necessitates us to ask curious, non-judgmental questions. And that is a loaded bullet. Curious, non-judgmental questions. What are curious, non-judgmental questions? So we talked about a little bit about that. For the most part, people are not overtly excluding one another. People are not lurking in the shadows, jumping out to harass and discriminate. What happens is that out of speed and pressure, we show people if they're part of our group, not part of our group, through what is called micro-messages. Micro-messages are the subtle, small things that we show and demonstrate to people through our body language, through inflection, tone of voice. Let's say hypothetically, I see Kimberly George in the hallway. I run to her, I say hi, I give her a hug, we have this banter, we're excited to see each other, we're high-fiving each other. We're beyond excited. This is how I greet Kimberly every time I see her. I see Jennifer down in the hallway and I see Jennifer and I say, hey, Jennifer, and I keep on walking. The micro message that I send to her is, I did something fantastic for Kimberly and something from which I would never do. The idea of this discrepancy shows up when we engage across difference. And the only way we can mitigate that is engaging across difference. So we need to ask curious, non-judgmental questions. One of the ways to do that is to imply openness. Most recently, I was outside and it was raining. And one of the things for me as a Black woman is my hair. It's a big thing. My hair gets wet. I become Roberta Flack or Shaka Khan. My hair gets really large. It won't even fit in the screen that you see my face in. It's just out here like a lion, which is the reason why I don't get my hair wet. So I will sit out in a lobby and wait for the rain to stop if I don't have an umbrella. And this gentleman saw me waiting for the rain to stop and he said, oh my goodness, you can't be that vain, can you? A little water won't hurt you. But first of all, I'm looking at this person like, who the heck are you? But realize that his question is that everybody else is running out of the rain and you are not. His question didn't imply openness. It didn't show that he was wanting to understand me. What happened was that he judged me in his question. I've had plenty of fantastic people who have asked, Ericka, you never get your hair wet. You will stand inside for an hour before you go outside without an umbrella. Why is that? Do you hear how that why that now makes me want to explain? That allows us to be able to say that there is something that I don't understand and I want you to explain it to me. That makes me want to talk. That makes me want to tell you all about it. Okay? The next piece is to be an advocate. And that means that we got to leverage our own privilege and power. We have three types of power. One is relational power, resource power, informational power. And regardless of where you land, you have power. Regardless of who you are, you have privilege and you have power. Relational power is this ability to connect others with people who they can't connect to themselves. Every single one of us has a person that we could connect another person to that can help advance them, help give a voice, help them have opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. I'm leveraging my privilege by saying I have access to the individual. Remember, power is the ability to control the outcome. And I'm going to use my power to give somebody else the access to this person. Relational power. Resource power is the ability to influence behavior or decision making. That means for all of my people who are sitting at the table or part of the conversations around what is the organization going to do? How are we going to treat our employees? Who are we going to advance? Who's considered high potential? Who's considered a good performer? To sit there and be able to say, hey, I have a person that we haven't considered. The privilege is being at the table. Power is saying, I have a person that needs to be discussed. Informational power is access. Access to people who have inside information. Now, for me, this is where administrative assistants, executive assistants live. Executive assistants have all of this, do they not? And of course, from a dominant subordinate group, we might not put an administrative assistant in a power position, but they have all the power. They determine who connects with their leader. They determine who is going to have that influence of the behavior by the amount of time that they give them. And on top of that, they have access. I have an administrative assistant, executive assistant, who one day I was walking to meet with a CEO. I needed to stop by and get a signature. And she saw me coming and she goes, mm-mm. And I look at her and I was like, God, take 5 minutes. And she's like, so I just kept on walking and turned around and walked. A person that she was not as familiar with, maybe wasn't connected to, came up right after me and said, does he have a couple minutes? And she said, absolutely, go right in. See, what happened was that we weren't meeting. We're not going to meet our quarter. And if we don't meet this quarter's numbers, then we might not meet the year's numbers for the end of the year. We just found that out. And she was protecting me by saying, don't go in there today. That's not the best move. Connection, influence, access. We all have the privilege to have connection, influence, and access. The power that we need to leverage is giving people who don't the opportunity to do so. And lastly, to be an advocate. I use this kind of clip-arty picture as an advocate to give you a visual image. My son is 6 and we watch a lot of Wild Kratts and Animal Planet. And we were watching Animal Planet one night and they said that, birds who flock together, that there's always a leader bird. And we as humans make the assumption that the leader bird is always the leader bird. It's not true. Throughout the flying or throughout the journey, the leader bird who takes on all the headwinds, who has to flap really hard to allow the birds behind it to coast, that bird, when it gets tired, falls back into the center of the flock. And one of the birds who have been coasting comes up in the front and then flaps and takes the headwinds for the people behind it or for the birds behind the leader bird. Being an advocate is stepping in front and saying, I got you. I will flap hard for you. I will take the headwinds for you so that you can coast. The video that we saw before, where we had the women having the talk, they are flapping hard. For those of you who don't have the talk, why don't we find that opportunity to say, how can I be the leader bird? Take on some of those headwinds so that they can flap less. That's being an advocate. I have a quick video that I want to show you that we didn't get to watch last time we were together. I wanted to show you this because this is power. This is privilege. And this is leveraging it. And then we do the chat that I see that there's so many people in the chat. So we'll get to the chat right after. So I'm gonna play the video and then we'll get to questions and chat after. Here we go.
Dedication. Loyalty.
You're getting better at this, yeah. Next week, buddy.
Friendship. The choices we make reveal the true nature of our character.
The gentlemen that were playing basketball that didn't have the choice to be in the wheelchair or not. Their privilege was that they're able-bodied. Their privilege was that they could play basketball in the normal way. But they leveraged their work to say, nope, you, my friend, cannot. And so we will play it your way. They took on their headwinds by finding chairs and sitting and doing that so that they could play together. We have that opportunity every day. We can't maybe control other people's unconscious biases, but we can control ours. We have the opportunity to engage across difference, be an advocate, and leverage our privilege and our power to help those around us. The Alliance gives us an opportunity to do that in a safe space. My question to you is how are you doing that in your work environments? For those of you who are going to be participating in the kind of in-person kind of group activities or group discussion that are going to happen after the session, you're going to see that I have given some questions to help you ponder that, to help you identify your privileges and where you can leverage your power. Thank you for giving me time today. Particularly thank you for your grace while I navigated the technology challenges of being in the airport trying to get to my mom. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and then ask if Jennifer can help me with questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. And yeah, let's open it up for questions. I know the chat was disabled for a moment, but you guys should be able to chat now. So if anyone has any specific questions for Erica, feel free to start typing. As we're waiting, just as Erica said, we have another collaboration session next week to kind of dive down into this session and really have those open conversations. It's on August 5th. If you go to the website, you can register for that collaboration session.
And please also leverage the chat for feedback on the session. You know, I think this is one of those topics that are challenging to navigate. And so we wanted to make sure that we are giving honor to the topic, but also do it in a way that everybody can feel engaged. I love seeing the groups. Thank you for that. I love that. Okay. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you, Leah, right? Having to fly and take care of family while also meeting work obligations. Whew, I'm telling you. It's interesting, we talk about younger generations and how we're going to navigate younger generations in the workforce, but we also have to acknowledge that there are generations in our work environment who's also dealing with aging parents and having to navigate that, their self-care, their children's care, right? Niece, nephew, whatever, what's going on, work and aging parents. And I know I'm not the only one. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, everyone. So that there's going to be some additional questions. I'm going to be providing you with a link to another video for you to explore kind of power and privilege and how that shows up. And remember that it shows up typically not overtly. It shows up through those micro messages, those subtle ways that we show people that we're with them or not so much. So thank you for your time today. If I don't see any other groups, I'll pass it back to Jennifer to close us out.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ericka. As we're seeing in the chats, this is definitely a conversation that we need to continue to have to broaden our perspectives. For everyone that has joined today, feel free to share this webinar on demand. You guys will be getting an email tomorrow with the link, as well as we'll be posting it up on the website and social media. So feel free to share. Ericka, thank you so much for your time, for doing this in the airport. Safe travels and thoughts and prayers for your mom. And everyone, thank you for joining, and we will all see you soon.